Richard Watson, well, with me is a former head of the disbanded group Al-Muhajirun, Anjem Chowdhury, which the convicted men belong to. Anjem Chowdhury, thanks for coming into Newsnight. Will you condemn what these men have done?
No, not at all. I think that the comments which are being made in November 2004 must be put into context. This was a time, if you remember, that the British and the Americans were causing mass destruction of the infrastructure of Fallujah. There were over 200,000 people made homeless. Estimates around 50,000 people were killed. And weapons of mass destruction were used. Cluster bombs, napalm and white
comments
phosphorus.
He made just before that terrorism is part of Islam. Comments that he made afterwards that the bombings were completely praiseworthy. What kind of context do you need for that?
Well, the context is that, you know, the comments were made. Look, if someone comes into your home and starts to kill people indiscriminately, you cannot talk about the person who's defending his home in isolation from the person who's occupying and entering illegally.
So you see nothing wrong with what these men have done?
No, at the end of the day, what the police have done is they've got a DVD. They did not get it from Sheikh Bakr Mohammed's house because all his items were returned and that was not included. They've held this for 2 years. The statements that have been made are on the DVD. There's no evidence of anyone being incited. There's no evidence of any money being collected. There's no evidence of anyone indeed going abroad. So this is a political maneuver by the government to silence anyone who speaks up against their foreign policy.
Despite a conviction in the British courts, in the country in which you live, you don't believe
What are you talking about? You're talking about draconian laws, you're talking about a non-Muslim judge, you're talking about a non-Muslim jury, you're talking about people who've been whipped up into a frenzy. If you pick 12 people off the streets and then ask them about Al-Muhajirun after you've demonized them in the Blair Bush Corporation, then what do you expect? They're going to find them guilty.
Did Abu Mariam look as if he'd been demonized? Did he look as if he'd been whipped up into a frenzy? We heard about a man in that report who joked about working in airport security and pressing a green button to let things go through rather than a red
button.
But
Glenn Genvy, you know, we don't know who he is. As far as I'm concerned, he works for the government. He could be a spy, you know, on behalf of the MI5, whipping people up into a frenzy, fabricating evidence.
He's a pretty important terrorist material.
I mean, nobody's ever heard of him. Who is he? Where does he live? The fact is, you've got a little clip of some talk, allegedly by someone called Abu Mariam. I know the individual concerned. His name is not Abu Mariam, incidentally. And, you know, they're saying that he was working some airport. I think you can contact the person firsthand. You can speak to him. I think you'll find that, you know, it's far away from what is being portrayed here.
But you know him. Do you condemn what he's doing?
Hey, well, no, he was talking generally about Islam. If you look at the whole talk...
No, he was talking about working in airport security and pressing the green button to allow through whatever he wanted. That was what we heard.
You take a comment which was made in jest. You know, he's probably delivering a 2 or 3 hour talk, and you isolate that comment, and then you want to demonize him and make him into a criminal. The fact is that the real criminals today, as you know and I know, are the British government, the atrocities they're committing in Iraq and Afghanistan, the many vicious laws. There's not one Muslim in this country who will agree with your analysis of Iraq and Afghanistan. They will agree with people like Abu Izzadeen and people like this.
He posted video on the website that you helped to run. Is everything on that website a joke?
Wait a second. Look, you're talking about clips of talks taken out of context and then used in the court of law. You know, this is the superiority of Islam, incidentally. As a judge of the Sharia court, I can tell you this case would never have made it into a Sharia court. The reason why? You have no evidence. The fact is that people are being prosecuted, you know, a couple of years later on the basis of a couple of clips, you know, which have been taken out of context in a court of law, where they're being tried by people who are already biased and prejudiced.
There'll be a lot of people watching this, Anjem Chowdhury, who say you prefer Sharia law, you have very little love for this country, you have very little respect for its systems. Why do you want to live here? Because you can get away with what you do?
Wait a second. People were living under apartheid South Africa. People who lived in the 1960s in America where they were very vicious towards the black community. I live in an apartheid Britain. I want to change the society. Well, I want to change the society. If you live in the jungle, it doesn't mean that you act like the animals. I can present Islam as an alternative. I believe that we can live together as decent human beings where the divine law can be implemented, your life, your honor, your wealth can be protected, the basic needs can be provided. That is what the Sharia calls for.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us. Well, the Labour Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Keith Vaz, is with me. Keith Vaz, I'm not sure what you made of that, but isn't the truth that the security services were too slow off the mark to cut down on the kind of incitement to terrorism that we've only just seen today been convicted?
Well, a court of law has made a decision after a trial. I disagree absolutely with everything that Mr. Chowdhury has said. Obviously, he has a right with the free speech in this country to be able to say the things that he said, but I disagree totally with what he said. There has been a trial according to the rule of law in this country, and these men have been found guilty. I make no comment on the time it's taken, because these are very, very complicated issues.
Yeah, but it's not just the trial. We knew about this group's activity. Newsnight knew about the group's activity for years. Presumably the security services did as well. Details of these extremist websites passed to anti-terror police back in 2005. There'll be people sitting here scratching their heads saying, why wasn't it taken more seriously, more quickly?
Well, I'm sure it was taken seriously, but we have legislation that was framed and passed by Parliament, the 2000 and 2006 Terrorism Act, and we have the security services, and
but
it's
we
their
could have
job.
tightened those laws on terrorism, couldn't we?
Well,
we could have tightened
we are
them
always
early.
tightening the laws on terrorism. We have some tough laws. They're going to get tougher with the proposals that have been put forward by the government, implementing many of the recommendations that the Select Committee has put forward.
And yet,
but it must be up to, if I could just say this, it must be up to the security services to do what they have to do in a parliamentary democracy, conscious of the rule of law. These are draconian powers. I think they did the right thing in the right time frame. And it's appropriate that it should have ended up in court with a conviction.
I can hear your legislative voice there, and I understand that. But if you step back from it, you know, as the Home Affairs Select Committee, a catastrophic mistake was that every person that they left then recruited 10 more, who then recruited 10 more, which grew exponentially. We're now talking about 2,000 voices.
Well, we don't know if they did leave them. The fact is the security services act in their own way. It would not be right to discuss how they act here on Newsnight. It's up to them to gather the evidence. It's up to the prosecutors to continue. What we need to do is engage with the Muslim community. I represent a seat in Leicester that has about 10,000 members of the Muslim community. I think very few of them...
How do you engage with the kind of extremist views?
Well, we can't engage with Mr Chowdhury, but we can engage with those people who believe in the laws of this country. I don't believe that we should have Sharia law in the United Kingdom. We have laws which the vast majority, absolutely the vast majority of Muslim people in this country support, because they go to the ballot box and they elect governments and they oppose governments in the proper way. They don't go about it in the way Mr Chowdhury has suggested.
OK, Keith Vaz, thank you very much.